Welcome back to On Background, the podcast that gives you the real scoop of what's truly going on behind the headlines and how investigative reporters go about getting it. I'm here with Eric Eggers with the Government Accountability Institute, which hosts the podcast, and we're very excited about our guest we have with us today. She's Anna Giaritelli, an award-winning journalist for the Washington Examiner and an expert on immigration. She breaks all the great stories on immigration and ICE over the last several years in Washington, D.C. I have a lot in common with Anna, and she's also a friend and colleague. I worked with Anna at the Washington Examiner, and she was also the runner-up for the DAO Prize last year for her immigration reporting. It was the same time when I was deeply honored to receive the top prize. So next week is the next DAO Award Gala. It's the third annual. And we want to tell you a little bit about that. The DAO Award is sponsored by the Young Americans for Freedom organization and is going to non-legacy journalists. And it's designed to, and really is giving the fully discredited legacy media a run for its money with the Pulitzer Awards. It's contending with the Pulitzer. And Matt Taibbi and his team won the first DAO Award for their Twitter files in 2023. And I was the second winner for my series on the Secret Service fallout after the assassination attempts against President Trump last year. So we're in extremely good company having Anna here today. I want to welcome Anna. And why don't you start off by telling us about your DAO Award-winning series on immigration?
Yeah, it was such an honor to come in second place to you of all people. So, Anna, it was, I've been covering border issues since before President Biden took office. So before, some of the other legacy media descended on the border during the border crisis, I was down there and just gave me really good context for what was happening under President Joe Biden. We had months where we saw 250,000 people coming over the border illegally, now down to under 10,000 people arrested per month. So huge change, a lot of scandal and cover up, a lot of different things going on in those 4 years. And now, going on in terms of how ICE and Border Patrol are getting along and carrying out President Trump's deportation operations. So the investigations continue a little bit differently now.
Yeah, it's a good summary. Eric, I know that you had some great questions last week about the infighting between ICE and the Customs and Border Patrol and some of the fallout over the elections, the gubernatorial elections in both Virginia and in New Jersey and Prop 50 in California about the Hispanic vote. So do you want to take it from there on those types of questions?
Well, I was joking with you, Susan, before this episode. By the way, Anna, thank you so much for being here. And I'm in no way intimidated by being the only one that's not an award-winning journalist on this podcast. I just want to be, in case anyone was worried about me, I'm fine. So, but I do want to say, Susan kind of casually referenced that there was like some tension between Border Patrol and ICE, and I meant to follow up on that, but we were kind of towards the end of the episode. So just give people some context, I guess, for that, just because you just referenced it. How does that happen, and what does that look like, and then how does that sort of manifest itself in terms of actual enforcement on the ground?
Yeah, so Border Patrol is tasked by Congress with arresting people who come over the nation's borders between the land ports of entry. So where you or I would drive our cars across and go through customs. And then ICE is based inside the country. They're going after people who are in the country illegally, criminal record or not. And part of ICE is also responsible for some major investigations, similar to part of the Secret Service's role. And so they're working in tandem on immigration. They're allowed to make the same arrests. They're enforcing the same federal immigration laws. The issue is that President Trump has pushed ICE since January to ramp up deportations. It hasn't been going so well. Part of the problem, as I've rode along with ICE on a number of occasions, is that ICE will find out someone's been arrested by the local police, ask them to be held. The police will release them. And so it's then up to ICE to figure out where that person lives, where they work, where's the best place to encounter them and make an arrest. That takes days, sometimes months of planning and tracking. And so going at it one by one, trying to arrest people, ICE has less than 7,000 deportation officers it's a lot of work. And so Border Patrol's been frustrated. Border Patrol views ICE as having dropped the ball and not following people, the millions who were released into the country under Biden. And ICE blames Border Patrol for releasing or not catching those people at the border or catching them and releasing them into the country. And so both at the rank and file level and then at the highest senior executive service levels in Washington, you have officials in both agencies speaking with me as well as Homeland Security saying, they're not doing enough. They're not doing enough. Now Border Patrol has been called in and is helping ICE in a number of cities nationwide and certainly taking a more aggressive approach that is getting a little more concern from some of the legacy media.
Now, Anna, I read last week that there was some kind of tension between ICE and Border Patrol over how far to go, whether these raids are just targeting criminal aliens or are they going, sweeping and doing a dragnet and sweeping up, just people who are at restaurants, working at restaurants, maybe at the Home Depot. I know there's some blowback from the elections last week that Eric talked about because when it comes to the Hispanic vote, because Donald Trump won 40% of the Hispanic vote, it was a very high watermark for Republicans, ability to win the Hispanic vote. And we're wondering if there's some evidence that deteriorated last week in those elections that we saw, those special elections, the gubernatorial election. So we're wondering if there's tension within the administration, maybe the White House and ICE and Border Patrol on how far to go, whether just to target criminals or do more of these wider sweeps.
Yeah, people at the top of ICE and Border Patrol are telling me that this comes down to what they're being told by the White House and Department of Homeland Security. You have Kristi Noem, the Secretary of DHS, and Corey Lewandowski, who's an advisor there, pushing for more and more aggression. They're the ones who are actually, Greg Bavino, the Border Patrol commander who's leading these operations in cities, he's reporting to them directly, not to the chief of the Border Patrol or to the head of Customs and Border Protection. And then you have the other side, which is the White House. Tom Homan, border czar, former head of ICE and a Border Patrol agent, who's kept a very low profile and trying to stay outside of things. But what I'm told is Tom is concerned that the Trump administration and the White House are pushing for too many arrests, which just is impossible when you look at the millions of people in the country, the very limited number of deportation officers and places to detain people and such. And so that's crashing right now at this point.
Homan's concerned about what? Like that the expectations are unrealistic given the staff that they have?
Yeah, they're unrealistic. And he's really concerned that, Trump's already gone through a number of ICE directors since January. We don't have a confirmed director at ICE. We haven't since Obama was president. And so Homan is concerned that Todd Lyons could take the fall. The current ICE director could be pushed out again. Part of the issue is that Border Patrol is sending in some of its senior officials to take senior positions at ICE. And so that's really unprecedented. It is called for in Project 2025, interestingly enough, for ICE and Border Patrol to be combined. So, it's just one of the things we're keeping the eyes on, what may actually be happening. And certainly Border Patrol appeals to Trump. They're the ones, I want to add, who actually do these at-large operations. ICE is targeted and going in after specific people every single time. They might go into a house for this certain person and then make collateral arrests like the family. Border Patrol is much more kind of like free-ranging. They'll go to a Home Depot and do enforcement. So that's where people are at risk. When you see the guys in green or the camo, that's Border Patrol. Blue, regular clothing, and black tends to be ICE.
So Anna, who's driving that's at the top? Does Donald Trump agree with Tom Homan that they're trying to push too far, and within the White House is Stephen Miller? Where does he stand since he's the domestic policy advisor and he has always taken the lead? I knew that he was the source of many immigration stories on Capitol Hill for years and years and years when he was working for Senator Jeff Sessions. So I know this is top of mind for him. Immigration has always been. So tell me the dynamic, if you can, in the White House, who's pushing Tom Homan to go harder?
Yeah, Stephen Miller is pushing, he's in line with the Department of Homeland Security. So Christine Noem, they really like this. President Trump also, I'm told, really likes this tougher approach that has been coming out of Chicago. Border Patrol has been in Chicago, hundreds of agents on the ground helping ICE. They're now looking at what my sources are telling me, going to Charlotte and even New Orleans, both places that the commander, Greg Bovino, has lived and worked. So where he has connections on the ground there. But it's coming from the top. And President Trump likes that. He wanted to hit 3,000 arrests per day. ICE is not hitting that. So if you're not going to do that, he likes that this approach by Border Patrol is very in your face. I'm sure you've seen social media videos going up multiple times a day on ICE and Border Patrol's Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook pages, really meant to scare people. The Trump administration has said that, we're coming for you. And they've admitted that that is part of the fear tactic. If we can't physically arrest you and deport you, we hope you're scared enough of us coming that you're going to self-deport. And they're claiming over 1 million people have self-deported since January amid this messaging.
Do you think that's true? By the way, I have another numbers question for you after this. By the way, this is amazing. It's like talking to ChatGPT. Just like it doesn't matter what you ask. Like here comes all this great information with details and so. This is really fun. Yeah. So do we think that's? Do we think that's true?
I would say people on the left, immigration advocates and such, some really great lawyers that I know have suggested it's not true. We know that the number of foreign workers in the country has dropped over 1 million since Trump took office. It's difficult to know within that number how many were illegally present in the country versus, early on we saw problems with people with visas or different legal avenues getting into the country. We saw problems with that. So I think it has kind of scared everyone. I definitely do believe people are leaving. I've heard anecdotally from people who help immigrants who are undocumented that they are getting a lot of people asking or saying, hey, I'm going to relocate back to such a country and, be with my family and maybe come back one day. But I do think it's happening, even with the number of actual deportations that ICE is doing. There's also been criticism that the 500,000 they've reported since January is not fully telling the whole story.
So just quickly, if they want to make 3,000 arrests a day, but they're not, how many are they getting?
They're getting over 1,000 a day at this point, which is considerably high still. And here's the thing I would say just to explain for ICE and Border Patrol why that isn't higher. Under Biden, ICE was doing pretty good numbers, pretty average, lower than average, but still pretty good. And part of the issue is you don't have people getting released into the country every day by ICE and coming across the border. And ICE's deportations, removals, those are two different terms, but they're all included together at the end of the year to show how many people are being removed from the country. And that includes normally hundreds of thousands of people who come over the border illegally who are turned back. And so when you don't have that group of people crossing the border and being sent back, it frees up ICE to focus only on sort of the bad apples in the country, but it automatically makes those numbers lower at the end of the day. So ICE is sort of fighting, kind of a weird battle. And so I don't think they've done a great job messaging to the American public to explain, hey, here's why it's not higher.
See, Eric, I told you she was the real deal. She is the expert that I would always go to on issues, internal conflicts in between ICE and Border Patrol and the numbers itself. She's covered this for years and always was out front on all the stories, breaking them exclusively. So, and I know you're also from our backgrounds at the Examiner, we always have to consider the political implications of these as well, of these issues. So you saw that about 2/3, the polls are showing, of Hispanics in this country are concerned about how far these rates are going. Is that going to impact the midterms negatively for Republicans and possibly end up taking the majority away in the House or Senate? So we're going to see impeachment all over again for Donald Trump. Is this having a boomerang effect on that?
It is interesting. And I think the effects of the raids, the immigration enforcement has yet to be seen completely, right? If 1 million plus people have left and then 500,000 more have been deported, then not just what's the political implications, but the politics might be affected by supply chains and people who are out working jobs, low paying jobs, working in the fields, working in factories, all delivery people. If those jobs aren't being filled because so many people are leaving in those industries, then prices are going to go up in order to recruit new workers and such. And so it'd be interesting. It's not an overnight thing you see an effect from, but if the people who are leaving and being forced out will, largely predominant Hispanic communities will have an impact on how much I'm paying for bread at the store or how much my Uber bill is going to cost to get something delivered. And I think certainly the Hispanic community has leaned a little bit more in towards Trump, certainly the legal Hispanic community. Down on the border in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas, you see a lot of very right-leaning Democrats, and then you see some left-leaning Republicans that have gone for Trump a lot lately. So I think Trump has to walk a very careful line of how much is too much and helping the public understand why he's doing this. This is not meant to, hurt the economy. It's not meant to do these other things. But what is his plan when, say, the economy is impacted by removing, a lot of people who work in certain industries?
Those are great points, Anna. In terms of people don't think about how integrated some of the illegal immigration is into our society. I have a uncle in the Central Valley of California who's a farmer. He's retired now, so I can be quite honest that the burden was on him to check the identification and to ensure that they were legal immigrants. But in reality, it was just a part of the economy, and that where we get our food, they call the Central Valley the breadbasket of the world. And that's part. We have cheaper strawberries. It's how much do you want to pay for your strawberries? Basically, is the question that's always get asked in California for decades. So we'll see the impact, and people are hitting Trump. Critics are hitting Trump over the economy again after these elections, after the election fallout. But I also know, Anna, that you were a Washington, D.C. resident, as I was for 23 years, but you were more recently there. I left in 2017 and decided I want to go back to my native California, where there's plenty to write about, and I have. But you had a terrible experience with crime in D.C. I had a close call last year after the International Religious Freedom Summit where I was lunged at. But I got away and I ran. And it's just, to me, is very telling about crime in D.C. that you've had this terrible experience. I have had, and we all know people who've had, brushes with crime, and yours was far more than that. You have a new book coming out in April called Under Assault. I can't wait to read it. It's going to take a look at your own experience. But what happened to you, and what was the D.C. Court system like about not keeping this guy in jail so that he could go out and harm other people, or maybe you again? It's just a harrowing story. I'm sorry you had to go through it.
Yeah, in 2020, during COVID, I was walking on a Saturday morning to go to the post office and was very quickly attacked by someone on the street and sexually assaulted as he took me down on the street and was screaming to get away. He was also screaming. I was rescued by people who ran over, and that man got away that day, and police were able to, because of the type of assault, get DNA from my clothing. 3 months later, they got back to me and said, there's been a match in the system. He has a criminal record, so we actually have his DNA, and we're able to verify who this is. He's a homeless man who lives outside Union Station, which is a couple blocks from the Capitol where I'd been that day. And we're going to go arrest him. And so they found him on the street. They arrested him. And the U.S. Attorney's Office moved to charge him for a sex abuse charge. And he was released from jail the following day after being arrested. And the judge said there's just not enough room in the DC jail to hold him. And so, the U.S. Attorney's Office is just relaying all this to me because we weren't going into court at that point. And so over the next 18 months, our case got delayed twice, 6 months. and finally came underway late 2021. And by then he'd been arrested 5 more times for exposing himself by the Supreme Court to someone. He violated the restraining order, wasn't supposed to come back to my apartment because that was the scene of the crime where he'd ambushed me. And he was caught on the street with a machete, as well as a couple other offenses.
Oh my
And so
goodness.
in each of those, he was arrested, brought into jail, and I applaud those police officers because they recognized this guy is a problem. We're bringing him in again. And the judge released him again the following day in all of those circumstances. And so I didn't feel safe. I left DC, not sure where to go, actually, because DC was my life. It was where I was going to live for decades to come. It's where work is for me. And eventually we did get to trial. I went testified before the grand jury, and he ended up accepting a plea deal for about a 2-year federal prison sentence for my attack, for the 5 arrests. And then I found out a sentence saying that he'd also attacked an off-duty female police officer in the same part of DC right before me. So all of that was wrapped into a little 2-year package. And the kicker of it all is that if you look at DC police crime stats, they used to list stats by pins on the map, not general color to show regions. And my crime wasn't listed on there after all of this. And so I'd reached out to the Metropolitan Police Department and asked, I'm a reporter, I'm also a victim, I'm confused, have you not had time to post the stat? And they said, we don't post all felonies on the crime map. And so because even though he went to federal prison, because it wasn't the most serious type of sex abuse charge, which would be rape, it was not included on there. So that's where we are now, 5.5 years after the original attack.
That's terrible. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. How does that, I guess, just because you talked about, I know you've been reporting on the idea that you've got, kind of law enforcement personnel in Chicago and then moving to Charlotte. So on some level, your beat is law enforcement adjacent, if not, how does that like sort of inform that personal experience, just what you cover on a daily basis?
It made me so much more empathetic with immigrants at the border. It also made going back to the border, because I've been down to the border over 60 times since 2018, pretty difficult. I came back from a trip once and thought I was having a heart attack and had to go to the hospital. And my blood pressure was 187 over something. And they said, it's stress. It's just things hitting you. I've dealt with a lot of trauma from this. And not just the attack, but what DC did, what the judges did, what the police did. I wrote an op-ed in August and came out publicly with my story and was really hoping that it would lead to change. And I've spoken with 2 aides at the White House about it. Senator John Cornyn and 7 other senators had me at the U.S. Capitol in September. And I spoke about shared my story again. But we haven't seen anything change yet. And so I can't do it all myself. I don't have the authority, but my story is one of many victim stories of ways that victims have seen, flaws in these systems, and things can be done. And it's made me a lot more empathetic with victims, and just aware that, the people I'm questioning every day, it's not necessarily that they're hiding things. Some of them are, but there's usually a little bit more to the story than they're sharing with us. And so it pushes me to really dig in deeper.
Yeah. And I would say it calls into question these statistics that we always are being told, that especially I've encountered that in my book with the statistics in California, that's crimes improving. The FBI, we're pointing to FBI statistics, but if they're not including all of the felonies, and they're only including, are they the victims? The defendants get to plea down their felonies to lesser felonies that are not included in these statistics, or this has been a problem that we've seen for years. And so even if we see, I think from your story, what it shows, we're seeing improved crime statistics in DC because Donald Trump he brought in the National Guard and wanted to get your thoughts on that. But, you know, behind the scenes, the court systems and the statistics and the people who tally them and provide them to the public, what kind of integrity do you think they have? And how much, if you've done any reporting on that, and where do you think the questions are that need to be asked from people like yourself, myself, other reporters, as we try to figure out if these stats are really up to snuff, if they're really real, or they're being faked, or at least toned down a bit.
Yeah, I don't think it's just DC. I think it's probably most police departments in the country, even your small town ones and sheriff's departments and counties, which informs the FBI's stats at the end of the year. So it's a whole massive issue. And when I spoke with the White House 2 weeks ago, I shared that they said, well, what would you do if you could do anything? And I said, we need crime stats that are accurate. When I look at the crime stats on DC's page, I don't know if it says an incident. What is an incident? Is that someone getting charged? Is that a 911 call? Is that a police officer showing up? So many different things. And I think the best way to go about it is to say, here's a map with a lot more filters, and you can plug in and see where are the 911 calls originating from. Where are officers responding to an incident? Where is someone being arrested? Where is someone being charged? Where is someone ultimately being, say, convicted? Where was the arrest originally for that? Certainly a more detailed map to explain. And I said to the Trump administration or the White House back in August and September, you have an opportunity now to really force DC's hands to say, you need to show all this, because you're going to tout that crime is down, which certainly they took 3,000 people off the streets in a city of 800,000. So crime is down there. But I said, what's the plan for 6 months from now? What's the plan for 5 years from now when you're not in office? How can you make this permanent? And I was told they were going to get back to me, and I'm not dissing the White House, but I think we need to continue to see this issue through. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but I certainly hope, and reporters can ask. When I asked the DC police, I said, I went through every felony. How do you post stats on sex abuse? What do you post on murder? I'm sure hoping that every murder's up there. What do you post on, certain burglary or that sort of thing? Really, you have to go through one by one, because they were not forthcoming when I emailed them again this year and said, I need a breakdown of what actual crimes are up there.
When do we have an incentive structure issue too? Because, we've seen the reports that there were whistleblowers within the ranks of the Washington, D.C. Police Department that said that they were told by supervisors that to reclassify certain offenses because they're trying to keep the numbers down. What incentive, and this might seem like a silly question, but what incentive do law enforcement agencies have to report all the crime? Because on some level, it kind of makes them look bad, right?
Yeah, you're right. You're completely right. There is no incentive to report crimes accurately in DC or other cities. Yeah, and that's part of the problem. If low crime is bad, it's kind of like the border, right? If very few people are crossing, then it looks good. We're doing our job right. But right now, the cartels are pushing drugs like crazy because, hey, they're not getting people across. They're losing billions of dollars every month. They've got to find a way to get around this and still generate profit. And so when crime is down, it doesn't mean the streets are safe. It means things just may be happening more covertly now.
Mm-hmm. It seems like, you would bring the National Guard in, and it's kind of like a triage situation. And then later on, if you get those people behind bars, it just really depends on how tough the court system is.
Mm-hmm.
In California, we have, the Prop 47 that lessened the felony convictions to misdemeanors if it was under $950 of the things that they've stolen, goods they stole. But that was overturned last year because even people in San Francisco were fed up, and they threw out their district attorneys, both in San Francisco and LA. So you have obviously people are fed up with the level of crimes in these urban centers, and yet you don't know that their court system has changed one iota in DC, especially where you were experienced. I'm curious, we like to talk to reporters, just to sort of summarize, we're going to have to wrap it up here, but I like to talk to you about how you get your sources. We were talking a little bit about this yesterday. There seems to be some misconceptions on how women reporters get sources in Washington, D.C. And I was curious about your thoughts about, how do you do your job and build these sources up over time?
Yeah, the best way has been all my travel to the border, as well as within the country to different ICE facilities and ride-alongs and such. Going out with public affairs officers from every department. They're usually not as forthcoming, but rank and file agents or officials from Border Patrol and ICE, DHS, they want to talk, and they want to talk off record, which means I can't use anything they're saying for a story. But a lot of times you build those relationships.
On background. You mean on background?
Yeah, I wish it was on background. Yeah, but I build those relationships based on trust first, and getting to know someone. And then from there, I'll say, and agents aren't going to know what background or this stuff is. So I'll say, can I use what you're saying, what you're telling me, as this term, as a CBP official or as a Border Patrol agent in Texas, moving forward with that. And really, even going on social media, have been able to get a lot of agents I know from meeting them. Maybe they don't want to give you their number because they're married, and that's, we want to protect everyone's relationships and such and privacy. But they want to follow you on Instagram, and then they see something you post and they said, oh, actually this is what really happened at this thing. And so it gives you a way to learn a lot new information and take that back to headquarters in Washington and fact check it and also speak with other agents. And so then they tell their friends, oh, so-and-so had the first story on that. And she was in, And so just word gets out like that. And, I've had a great experience on the border with agents. Never had anything weird happen. The guys are all, and the few women are very, very professional, and they take their jobs very seriously. If anything, they're very distrusting of the media. And I hope in my reporting that I can show them that I care about the truth and I care about what's actually happening. And, I'm not going to slant one way or the other. Everybody hates me on both sides some days. So,
yeah, that's how you get the story out.
Yeah. I mean, mainstream media malpractice is a market opportunity for a good reporter like yourself, right? So, I mean, it's just, and that's probably why you've been as successful as you have. My last question, Anna, this has been awesome. I mean, and no wonder you have been as acknowledged and accoladed as you have been as a reporter. You mentioned one of your sources is who gave you the heads up that we're going to see people like law enforcement and Border Patrol leaving from Chicago and then going to Charlotte and possibly New Orleans. And I guess my question is just from a practical standpoint, because people think you see Brandon Johnson in Chicago and J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, saying, no, we're not going to do this. So what is it like for them, for any of these law enforcement personnel, whether they're ICE or Border Patrol or the National Guard, to go into a city where the local or state officials don't actually want them, and how does that impact their ability to do their job based on your understanding?
Yeah, what we saw in Chicago and LA were really similar. Agents were really excited. Even the chief of Border Patrol told me on the record, Mike Banks said, our guys and girls are so excited to get out there and arrest the people they couldn't vet at the border and were forced to release under Biden. So following through on that. And typically when they get to a city, I follow some on social media, so I get to see their behind the scenes pictures. They're really excited. There's a lot to do. It's also a new city. They're typically always on the border. They don't get sent anywhere else. If they get sent to El Paso.
Like, wait, it's not the desert? What? Let's go.
Yeah, it's very exciting. So they've jumped at the opportunity to go to these major cities inside the country for 2-3 weeks at a time. And what I've seen the last couple of weeks, Border Patrol agents, they're not going to be there the whole 6 weeks unless they keep re-upping and stay there. But they're getting tired. And I wouldn't say tired of doing the work, but they're facing a lot of pushback and actually violence from people on the streets because people there are getting more and more agitated. And so I think pulling them out of Chicago at this point is a really smart move. The stories in Chicago and the run-ins they're having, I frankly can't keep up with how many are happening every day. So putting them in a new place, I think will give them a fresh start. And it's about the agent's safety too. So I think that'll also renew the energy that, hey, we're in a new spot, new targets here, new people we're going to go after. And yeah.
Well, certainly these are dedicated, patriotic people who are devoting their lives, putting their lives on the line and getting, just really attacked by these Antifa types and these fake writers or funded writers, as GAI has done a lot of research on Riot Inc. and the money behind it, fueling it. But I think, Anna, you are the perfect person to have an on-background conversation with, because you described how you get the sources is exactly how I do in the Secret Service. We are good listeners, and women are better listeners than men sometimes. So people might, project that we are say something that we are using our feminine charge, but we're just really sometimes just a listening ear for people who are out there on the front lines and really care about the integrity of the agency they work for, and sometimes don't think it's doing the best job it could be, or there needs to be a leadership change at the top. So I really thank you for being with us, Anna, and sharing your experiences. And I wish you all the best of luck on your new book coming up out April, called Under Assault. We're going to have to leave it there, but we hope that all of the viewers can subscribe to On Background on YouTube or where you get your podcasts. And we're just thankful that you joined us today for this great discussion.